think we're live. Thank you for joining us. This is the Christian Resistance. If you are hearing this, you are the resistance. You are the resistance against an ever-growing secular culture, secular mindset. One thing we all need to do and continue to do with love and kindness, but with boldness, is to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ. Proclaim it everywhere without embarrassment. Always be ready to give an answer for the hope that lies within you. But do this at all times. Be prepared to give an answer. Anyway, I have one of my friends on, a guest, S.J. Thomason. Say hi to everybody, S.J.
Hi, Josh. Hi, everybody.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. We had I think I need to plan these podcasts or these streams better, yeah, to give people ample opportunity to to get prepared to come on. But I'm glad SJ came on. SJ is a great apologist and defender, a great witness for the Lord. I think she's a great example. I think that's the type of person we can all learn from, but we all need to be ready to give an answer for the hope that we have, and do this. There's so many opportunities that come upon us in everyday life where we can say something, give a Christian worldview perspective on a certain thing. Challenge secular culture, challenge the hidden assumptions or the reasoning behind such and such going on. I could give lots of examples, but basically today we're going to be discussing, it's a basic apologetics and how we do that, how we incorporate apologetics in the proclamation of the gospel to everyday life. SJ, let me just ask you: is there anything that you've been working on lately that you might want to bring to the attention of our listeners? I think
Yes.
it may involve the Old Testament, and I think it may involve the book of Psalms.
It does. And let me lead up to why I'm so interested in the Old Testament. And it's because a lot of times when I go and I open my Bible, and I know this is something that might sound strange, but there's a whole bunch of those times, for some reason, it opens up to the exact same page on Luke 24, which is when Jesus encountered the two people on the road to Emmaus. And it says that Jesus opened their eyes to what was said in the scriptures. And so as I keep coming on that, I keep thinking to myself, what is in the scriptures? Maybe there's something that I don't realize or I need to know more about. And so I started searching for Dr. Michael Brown and looking up a lot of his videos and listening to what he was saying. And I stumbled upon a debate that he was having with James. Well, he and James White were on one side, the Trinitarian side, and they were up against a couple of Unitarians. And one of the verses that was brought up is Psalm 110. And it says on Psalm 110, it says, Yahweh, or the Lord, and Lord is all in caps, said to my Lord, and then it says, sit at the highest position in heaven until I make your enemies your footstool. And that's one version. That's the name of God version. But there's all these other versions that you can look at. But it says, so it says it's a psalm by David. Now, Dr. Michael Brown said that some Jewish people think that it's a psalm for David, even though in many verses it said it's a psalm by David. And so there are arguments for and against that are pretty clear that I can make. But before we get into that, we'll just say, so David is writing around 1,000 years before Jesus came, and he wrote the Psalms. He wrote the vast majority of the Psalms, and they're attributed to him. Mm-hmm. And when he says, the Lord said to my Lord, the big question that arises is, well, who is the Lord? That's Yahweh. And then my Lord is Adonai. And what's interesting is during the time when all of this was written, the way that the Hebrew text was written was just with consonants. They didn't have vowels. And
Yeah.
so when these verses were translated by the Greek Septuagint, which is around 250 years before Christ, and also as you see in the in the Dead Sea Scrolls, when these verses were translated, they were translated into, again, the Lord said to my Lord. It was the idea of Adonai being of divine power and the Lord also having divine power. So the interesting thing is that David, who is a king, who is ordained by God to be a king, who would be David's Lord? And so that's the question. Who would be above David? Because David was also called Adonai sometimes in the Old Testament. And so he was referred to as the Adonai term. So there are two terms that the Jews in Masoretic times, which is around 900 years after Christ walked the earth, they decided to add the vowels. And they knew that the Christians were running around talking about that verse because Psalm 110 happens to be the most referenced verse from the entire New Testament. It's referenced numerous times. So the Masoretic Jews decided that they were going to add vowels to Adonai, and they changed it to Adonai with Adonai. It's the one that can be used in either a divine or a non-divine way, referring to a master, a lord, or a superior. And then there's Adoni, Adoni, which is non-divine. And so they decided that they would turn that in, again, around 900 years after Christ. They added these vowels, and they decided that they were going to make the Adoni not have any reference to the divine. And so it would be as if David has Lord. And then they also said that David wrote it, which I can get into in a minute. But anyway, so they did that. But in many translations, in the Christian translations, in the English translations, you'll see that it says Adonai, my Lord. And so the question is, who is above King David? Well, Jesus brought that verse up and he wanted to stump the Pharisees. He said, who is this referring to? Who is the Messiah? And they said, well, the son of David. Okay, then when David said, the Lord said to my Lord, who is this referring to? And the Pharisees said, oh, we can't answer that. And because they realized that as a son of David, if the Messiah is the son of David, according to the 10 commandments, you are not allowed to elevate your son. Your son is not over you. Your son's not a superior. So for David, King David, who's at the top of the food chain, for King David to say, my Lord, he must be referring to somebody who is above him, even though it's supposed to be his son. So he can't violate Jewish law by calling his son his Lord, a superior. So he must be referring to somebody who truly is a superior. So it has to be the Christ. And so you see right there that going by their own rules, that this idea of the Lord and my Lord.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I knew it was mentioned in the New Testament, and Jesus talks about that. It's just very interesting how that is talked about by scholars. So I think that's just thank you for bringing that up. I think that's really nice. What I've been doing recently is just like looking at the biblical text, the resurrection narratives, and getting prepared for some of my debates that are coming up. And I think that's one thing that if we're interested in, that's one way we can defend the gospel of Jesus Christ, proclaim it, is through debates and dialogues with others. But it's not the only way. And if a person listening out there is not comfortable with a debate or a strict dialogue, then there are other ways to do that. Maybe just say something to somebody, or speak truth to power. Speak gospel truth to power. Bring up something in the in your work in the break room or something like that. So I think there are a number of ways where we can incorporate a Christian view to secular culture. I've also found it interesting, and I wanted to bring this up. You hear a lot of times people talk about movies. I think we can also, show that a Christian perspective on movies, we can also bring that up. SJ, do you have anything to say about how I'm thinking right now of the Marvel movies and how those are like a low level representation or a facet of you know uh, a quality that or an imperfect representation of or an idealization of something Christ could have. But do you have anything about how a person can use apologetics and bring that up to contemporary culture?
Yeah, I think that I like your idea with I love the Marvel movies, and
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that we see in the Marvel movies, and in a lot of movies similar to that, some Wonder Woman and some of the other ones even outside of Marvel, is that there's a myth, there's like a mythological legend where you have the weak suddenly acquiring these powers and becoming strong, and so you have Clark Kent becoming Superman, you have Wonder Woman, you have, and then the kryptonite, of course, is something that stifles him. Or you go into the Marvel movies and you've got the gods that they bring out, like Thor and some other ones. And a lot
Yeah.
of times you'll see that even in the very culmination of the Marvel movies, you see a lot of people were just sort of disappeared randomly. So you have, it's kind of similar to what we see in the New Testament, but a lot of the stuff that we see in the Marvel movies is built off of the New Testament idea of Jesus. And so you have the weak, the meek, the humble, and again, don't confuse meekness with weakness. It's restrained power. But you have
Yeah.
the meek becoming the strong. The meek will inherit the earth. And a lot of times you see in the Marvel movies is the good guys end up winning in the end. And so it's kind of similar to Jesus winning in the end. But the difference is in the Marvel movies and also in Superman, all those other movies, is a lot of times is the person has to seek within to become very strong. Like there was a female Captain, was it Captain Marvel?
Captain Marvel.
Captain Marvel. Yeah, so she had this idea where she had to seek within and solve her problems inside of herself. But in Jesus, according to Christianity, we seek outside. We seek God. We seek a transcendent truth and
Yeah.
a metaphysical truth. And so
Yeah.
that's the difference. We're not gods. We're made in God's image, but we're not gods ourselves. And so in the Marvel movies, of course, they are gods. You have Thor is the invented god of the Nordic
Yeah.
legends.
Yeah, and that's why, I call them low-level representations or idealizations of the one true God that we all live by and testify to through, well, the banner. I don't know if y'all see the scroll across the screen. How,
I did.
yeah, how atheists live according to the natural law, and as if God exists. We do that by truth, goodness, and beauty. We all recognize those. They're hard to define, but we can all give examples of those. And those examples that we give are something that points to something we all know to be true. That we all live our life according to a plan. That plan is the logos. And that's why I agree with Jordan Peterson that each of us, if we have a plan, and if you get out of bed this morning, as like William James said, we all have some kind of plan, even though if it's not a very good, well thought out plan. But that plan, bringing intelligibility to a world of chaos or uncertainty, is the logos. We're living out the logos in some imperfect way, even with our the limitations to our cognitive and cognitive faculties and sensory abilities. But yeah, I've been doing that. I want to say something about Captain Marvel though before we go on, SJ. Jonathan Sheffield?
Oh yeah.
Me and my wife, him and his family, we all saw Captain Marvel together.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah, yeah, we
That's
saw it
hilarious.
in a movie theater, and there where he lives. We hung out, I guess, and yeah, it wasn't the best movie, but I had a great
Oh, I
time with
liked
him.
it.
Oh, you liked
I
it.
of course I like the female finally getting finally getting a strength in the. I thought that was pretty
Yeah.
cool, but that's of course
Well,
I'm biased as you can see.
I thought it was a little woke.
Oh, did you? Yeah, well, the female. Well, I mean, it is. Yeah, that's it. I don't know. I liked it. I
but,
wasn't my
but
favorite though. I like the End Games one, whatever that was called, with
oh
all the
yeah,
different heroes, and
that
I
that was
liked the Black
fantastic.
Panther one too.
Yeah. Well, I think also it has a narrative, a story, and that narrative story, climaxing in Endgame, or the two-part Endgame and whatever was before it or after it. Um, that story. That's how we really remember, and I think it's a great way for God to communicate something to mankind via story rather than just you know these truths like one time giving us these rules, but he gives us a story to find out more about him. Many theologians and philosophers have talked about this, and it's called progressive revelation. um, Through the logos, we with the discovery of, or with the with time, we find out and discover truths about God. So instead of just God telling us everything in one way at one time, God reveals himself through the historical process.
Hmm.
um, so um, but I
Yeah, can
do
I
think
can I
that
bet?
there were key instances.
No, I like your idea. What you're saying with the story is very interesting because it goes back to Aristotle. So Aristotle said if you want to persuade people of something, and again, this is a few hundred years before Christ walked the planet, but if you want to persuade people of them, you can use three approaches. You use ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos is you establish credibility if you're persuading. Pathos is using emotion or appeal to stories, just like you're talking about. And then
Yeah.
logos is appealing to facts and appealing to statistics and those sorts of things. So anybody who's a very good communicator and persuasive person is going to use those three means of getting the message across. And so the most
Yeah.
memorable, though, of all of those, like you're saying, is pathos, is the story. People only remember about 30% of what you say if you're in a speech. But what they will remember in that 30% are the stories. And so we can remember the
Yeah.
story of Jesus Christ. The word became flesh and dwelt among us. And that whole story is something that really can attach to people. Can I say hi to Digital Hammurabi? He's in your chat right now. I don't know if he's still
Oh,
there, but
hello. Hello,
yeah,
Digital Hammurabi. Nice to see you. This is actually one of my friends, um, and we've discussed in different times. But this person is one of my friends in actual real life. So I appreciate you coming on, and you're
have
always
you met him in
welcome.
real life?
No, not in real life, but we've talked in
Oh, I
real
see. Like
life. So
on camera, real life.
yeah, and
Because
on the
I
phone.
was thinking of Jonathan Sheffield, and oh, you talked on the phone too?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Uh-huh.
that's good.
Yeah, he's a nice guy. Really appreciate it. I really appreciate friends. But to going back to you know tr- truth as in a story or revealed truth, and I believe Jesus is the ultimate revealed truth, and that happened a historical event in a certain place in a certain time in Judea in the first century. But we can also discover things through story, through reflecting on it, and through the logos working out. So instead of God just saying slavery is wrong, um, God reveals that through story. And very coincidental that you're on Digital Hammurabi, but I think we can get these points, or God can show us through different processes that last longer than simply if God says something one time and we're supposed to preserve it. But through the historical point of view, we can, come to a better understanding of it and reflect on it. And Paul also talks about this in Romans I believe it's Romans 12 or 13. Paul says, think about these things, think through these things. Paraphrasing, of course. But all I'm saying is that the this doctrine, or this theological doctrine known as progressive revelation, really, I think, undercuts a lot of the atheist speculation for why couldn't God just give it all at one time. I think a far better and superior way to understand something, to perceive and cognize something, is through story and through a long period of time. And it was the Christians that ultimately condemned slavery after they condemned medieval slavery, and then they condemned it a second time in the Americas. So even though you had this long tradition of slavery in all civilizations, it was the Christians, and they got this from their background knowledge of mankind made in the image of God. So authors such as Rodney Stark and different authors have argued that the end of slavery and so forth came about because of fundamental Christian assumptions, which were based on theology.
Yeah, like what Paul said, that neither slave nor free, nor Jew nor Greek, we're all made in the
Yeah,
image of God. We're all one. And so we're all
yeah,
Christ. And I want
yeah.
to build off that. And I want to be fair to the atheists who are maybe listening or will be listening at some point. They're going to say, well, wait a second. It was also some Christians who pulled verses out of the Bible and had the slave
Mm-hmm.
Bible, and some Christians owned slaves. So we have to be fair. There's always some bad actors, unfortunately, and we have seen those through history, sadly.
Yeah, yeah. There's always going to be, because none of us live up to the true, the good, or the beautiful, but we participate that in an imperfect way because of our sin nature and our cognitive limitations, and just thinking that if it's always been done this way, if slavery has always been a fact of nature, a fact of civilization, then who are we to try to change that? Christianity brought about these various revolutions that happen all across the world. People like Tom Holland and
Yeah, that's a good book.
others have really discussed that, delineated that point. It's no surprise. Well, it's no surprise that the condemnation and eventual eradication of slavery, the birth of the scientific method, the first universities and hospitals and orphanages, they started by Christians in Western Europe. Again, Rodney Stark, Ronald Numbers, others make this point. But it all goes back to basic theological doctrines.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm looking at a digital Hammurabi. He says he's still in the chat, and he says, I have a chapter on slavery in the Hebrew Bible, New Testament, early Christianity, and the antebellum South, if you are interested. And so I know that this is one of his fields of expertise. He studies ancient
Yeah,
Near East. He's
yeah.
actually agnostic, though, so he's looking at from an agnostic sort of perspective. So it'd be interesting to see how he's handled that chapter, like how it fits in with our belief system, or is it going to? Because I read one of his other books on that book was on. Wait a second, he's got a new book. I'm missing. He's got a book on slavery. That's the one I've read. And now that I think about it, I did evaluate that fairly. I thought he had a couple of things that I disagreed with, but for the vast majority of it, he was just stating factual information. And then he's another book that's out that he has Seth Andrews, who's used the voice to give an audible version of this book on the Old Testament and how atheists should interpret it. I haven't read that book, so
I would love to dialogue with Seth Andrews. I think I mentioned that to him on Twitter. But anyway, yeah. So that's great that you discussed that.
He has another question here. He says, "Do you guys see my recent interview?" And he's wanted to clarify this chapter is in his new book that Seth Andrews
Oh,
audibly read. But I again I haven't read that yet. So, did you guys see my recent interview with Dr. Michael Brown? Yes, I did. I follow Dr. Michael Brown like crazy. I love his stuff. I've had him on my channel a couple times.
I
He's
didn't.
traditional views. I like he sticks with the Bible and what it says, like Trinitarian views. But I did see your interview, and yes, that's fine, Josh. If you want to, did you see his interview, Josh? Did you say you saw it?
I
Oh,
did
there's two
not.
Joshes
No.
here. Josh and Josh.
Yeah, I did not
No,
see the interview. Yeah.
what was really interesting, and I tried to get Josh Bowen on my channel after I saw this interview because he was really letting out a lot of, actually it was rather emotional because he was talking about some emotional issues in his life, and
Yeah.
I found it a fascinating interview.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's
that
great.
offer is still open, Josh. Both Joshes, you guys can always come on my channel, both of you, if you want.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe we could all come together. Maybe that would be really interesting.
Mhm.
And again, I'm really good friends with Josh. Not me, but him. So sorry, that joke fell flat.
Now no, I get it. You're two. We have two
Okay.
Joshes, so we have
Okay.
to Josh B. Oh, you're both Josh B. too. I can't even do that.
How about I'm Josh the smaller. Or no, I'm playing. I'm playing.
Josh the greater and like the Old Testament, or James the
I'm
greater,
the
James the lesser. It's like who wants to be the
yeah.
lesser. Yeah, that's interesting.
Anyway, apologetics and how we can incorporate that in our daily lives. Can you give any examples of how you could incorporate that? Like, if, let's say, you hear someone talking about, I don't know, and I hope this doesn't offend, like the abortion issue. If someone is talking about that, like in a nonchalant way, like it doesn't really matter, like it's totally a person's choice whenever, like I might come in and say, I think we need to think wisely about this because people are made in the image of God. I think something like that will get people to think, and you don't really have to do a whole dialogue or whole debate. Even if you're there for a short time, you can make these substantive points, and I think it can really change or have a big impact on the dialogue, the conversation that was going on. SJ, do you have anything?
I do, because what you're saying now, I've been with relatives for the last couple of weeks, and so that's why I haven't had my YouTube channel going. And just to mention what happened, this actually goes against what I'd like to have happen. It's a less than ideal outcome. But first, I was with my parents and my brother, who's agnostic. He's from Germany. He and his son, they came over to visit us and collect my dog, and so they took my dog back to Boca. And then we went with the other half of my family, my husband's twin and his whole family, over to St. Augustine, and we spent a bunch of days there. We extended the vacation by a couple of days, and then we went down to Boca Raton and hung out with my parents and my mother-in-law and other people. And so I was sitting at my parents' house where my mom and dad, my mom's unfortunately got pretty bad health right now. She's got Lewy body dementia, which is like Alzheimer's on steroids. It's really awful. Yeah, but we were all sitting around a table, and my brother and my dad and my mom are, in fact, my mom was rooting for Bernie Sanders. So they are very liberal people. And so I don't know how it got brought up, but they always like to talk about politics. And that is the last thing I want to talk about with my family. I just don't want to do it. I don't want to go there. I'm like, I don't want to talk about it. But then they kept digging. And so finally I'm like, well, I said something about Roe v. Wade. And my dad's like, that's settled. That's already, it's not going to be overturned, Steph. Just get over this. I don't want to hear about it. Let's instead talk about X, Y, and Z. He wanted to talk about all of these other reasons why I should be a Democrat. I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm
Yeah.
independent. I don't want to fight. So finally, I got so frustrated, and this is really embarrassing, but I got so frustrated with them. I just ran out of I didn't run, but I got out of the house. I said, I don't want to talk about this anymore. I don't want to talk about politics with you guys. I got in my car. I drove down the road. I realized my mistake. I called him up. I apologized. I said, okay, I'm coming back. I don't want to leave on a bad note like that. And
Yeah.
so you can't, as my dad pointed out, he said, you're not going to change our mind, and we're not going to change your mind. And I said, so why are we talking about this? Let's make it end. So
Yeah.
I don't think that's an easy topic to bring up. Any
Yeah, it's
politics.
definitely not with especially family members. I got some pretty liberal parents when it comes to um, those issues. They're not liberal all the way, but and sometimes it's very difficult. So, and it even talks about this in the New Testament. Jesus had trouble, talking to his own family, to his own, a lot of his own family disowned him or weren't followers of him until after the resurrection. But um, I think sometimes you know, like maybe
Well, they didn't really disown him. They tried to stop his ministry. They thought he was crazy, which is pretty embarrassing to
it's pretty
say.
close too. That's pretty. I mean, it's not that far off,
Yeah.
but um, so I think it, saying something in the conversation or in a dialogue that you're having with something to really get them to focus or to consider their under um, their presumptions to their arguments, um, and stopping there, that might be a good way, a good approach to this. But yeah, the scenario you just gave, talking with the family members about it, it's so difficult, so difficult. Um,
Yeah,
do you
it's
have
impossible.
any?
Yeah, I'd say I heard Sarah
Uh,
Salviander say something that I thought was really, and I think you know who she is. She's an astrophysicist who was raised in an atheist family, and she became a Christian. But she said something that really resonated with me, and she said that when you're ready, when your eyes and your ears are ready for the good news and the message of Christianity, a teacher will come. And it's funny because it happened to me when I was on a plane. I was ready. I kept asking God, let me know. I need to know the truth, all that kind of stuff. And I happened to be sitting next to a pastor. And so I think that in her case that happened. And I would wonder in your case, did you encounter a teacher or somebody who sort of gave you, information that you really needed at that point?
well, I I went to Liberty University for my for my undergraduate degree, and Dr. Habermas was a real
Mm.
good friend of mine there. But before then, I just read a lot. I remember just coming to Christ because my mom, told me some things. And the Roman road, how to come to Christ, what it means to be a sinner, and so forth. But yeah, so just different points in my life. And of course, I had a big car accident. Before my car accident, like a week or two, I that's when it happened. That's when I gave my life to Christ. So um, I think I don't think there are accidents that happen. And I think if a person sincerely is seeking truth, that God will, in his foreknowledge, or what others would say in his middle knowledge, will send a missionary or something like that. I think that's a good reason for why we should send people, send missionaries abroad for evangelization. How are we to know that it's not God's ultimate plan for us for them to hear the gospel by our preaching? So it just seems like it comes from a prideful disposition to those who say, well, we shouldn't send missionaries. Um, it comes from a lot of pride. I think God uses our evangelistic endeavors to meet his ultimate ends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're reminding me of something that when you speak of missionaries, because I had Mr. Phil Fox on my channel, and he's a Native American, and I'm going to have Mark Charles on my channel on the 9th. And one of the things that both of these people have brought up is, actually, I know for sure Phil Fox, because he brought it up on my channel, but he said with the missionaries, they're Native Americans, and they said that a lot of these Europeans came into the country. We declared that we discovered America and all this kind of stuff. And then we thought that we termed the people who were already here as savages and less than humans and those sorts of things. And then sort of beat them up on, here, you got to believe Christianity and go against their own faith. And so they're both Christians. These two are both Christians, though, not because a missionary came and just stayed for a couple of weeks, wang, bang, pow, and we're just going to give you some information and then we're going to leave. They're especially Phil Fox is a Christian because he spent a long time with somebody. He spent a good period of time with some missionaries. And so I think it was over a year, and he really learned a lot from them and learned that even though the carriers and the deliverers of this religion were kind of corrupt in some ways, the people who were, some of these people aren't. So the ones that he met who were Christians who drew him to Christ, helped him draw to Christ.
I think you bring up a point that came into my mind now. Accepting Christ is built on relationships. And I think also abandoning Christianity is often based on bad relationships. Not always, but a lot of it has to do with relationships. And that's who we are. That's one thing about mankind. We're not meant to be alone, but we are meant to be with others. And I think this is a good reason for, authentic community, not like the Enlightenment taught that we are all automatons and just people of mere, survival or mere, need food and things. That's what makes us a person. But what makes us a person is also in community, or the polis, what Greeks, the Greek city-state, the polis. That's how Plato and Aristotle and Socrates thought of person. You can't, get them out of the polis and think that they're a complete, properly functioning person, but they're meant for communion with others. So
I want to build on that because I think that's something really interesting. That one of the things that distinguishes Christianity is the Trinitarian view that God said, "Let us make man in our image." So we have a community already in our Lord, and the Lord said to my Lord, "There is a community." And then the call of Matthew, the Father, go out in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. We've got this view that there are three in one, and it's fascinating. And so I wanted to say that, and I also wanted to say the idea of community. One of the reasons people go crazy when they're in solitary confinement in prisons is because they're in solitary confinement. They're not around anybody, and we are meant to be around other people. And then the last thing I want to say about that is I was thinking about The Great Divorce. Have you read that book?
I don't think so, no.
So it's C.S. Lewis's Great Divorce, and it's this idea of hell and heaven, and his perceptions of hell being a place that the doors are locked from the inside. And down in this sort of hellish existence, people can't get along with each other, so they keep going farther and farther apart from each other, and and they have no needs. One of the things about community is because we have shared needs, we realize we can't survive alone. We need the help of others. And so that's the whole thing with this hell idea from C.S. Lewis, which I thought was fascinating. Nice. And can I say to Digital Hammurabi one last thing? Digital says, I think he says, I think this is probably the larger difficulties for many former believers. There are many that I know, including myself, that were very reluctantly left the faith and would like it to be true. And so Digital, Josh, you're here, and I think you're one of the reasons why you listen to channels like this. I think you're open-minded about wanting to know the truth. I do think that. And he's sanctified through his wife, by the way, because she's a Christian, and that's what it says in 1 Corinthians. First or 2 Corinthians, I don't remember where, but So did you
Uh, okay,
you
that
want to
was
get
the
back to
end
our
of the quote.
yeah, that's what he said. He's talking about reluctantly left the faith. I honestly, I think if you look at the information surrounding the apostles and their experiences, that to me is extremely compelling. So,
Yeah, I think people ultimately leave the faith based on bad experiences, relationships. I think that's one of the reasons early Christianity grew, because of the elevated status they gave to women. This was in stark contrast to women treated in Greek or Roman, or Greek or Roman, or other parts. They weren't given the same status as women were in in the Bible, and especially in the New Testament, how Jesus treated women, and how the Gospels and New Testament was also put together. You had women, some women in leadership positions. So this shows, it was attractive to not just men, but different, to women also. So it's showing that it's incorporating a more plausible, um, a better way that um, corresponds ultimately to the truth. And again, the truth, the beauty, the truth, the beauty, beautiful, and the good are things we all recognize, incorporate in our everyday lives. I like to talk to people about how we do this by negotiation, or uh, uh, negotiating on different things, where you only negotiate for certain things because you think that there's something at the top of your hierarchy, and whatever is at the top of your hierarchy of values is going to function as either the true, the beautiful, or the good. It's going to function as in other words, as God. So yeah, so I think we all recognize that.
yeah, that actually offers the another point towards Christianity and also towards just a divine being, a superior being, a moral lawgiver. Because, like you're saying, with this hierarchy of values, I would say we have objective moral standards and objective
Mhm.
moral duties to do what's right. And then you say, well, what's right? Well, what's right is what's true, what's just, what's fair,
Yeah.
what's loving, what's kind, what's life preserving. And if somebody says, well, wait a second, what about when people hid the Jewish people from the Nazis during World War II, and they say the person had to tell a lie, and I say, well, you have to look at the entire basket, and you say that person had to go with what is the most important value in this hierarchical values, and it was looking at life preserving, loving,
Yeah.
fair, and just for the Jewish people.
Hmm.
So if they have
Yeah.
to, in that particular case, they have to fib to the Nazis, it
Hmm.
doesn't mean there's no objective moral values. It means that they've appealed to higher level values in that situation.
They're trying. I find this often. They're trying to alienate the good, the beautiful, or in this case, well, the good, the beautiful, or the true, from each other. So they're saying, well, is it true that hiding a person and lying to the Nazis is is um, is um, true? Is it true that you lied, and therefore they're trying to show a contradiction? No, this is all based on the intrinsic value of humanity. Um, so they're having that. I, I just think it's such a bad justification for arguing against the true, the beautiful, or the good by saying, well, would you lie in that situation? Yes, I would lie, because the outcome, and you have to take that into account, the outcome would be the taking of a life, and as people, we don't have that right to do that. Only God does.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, the underlining assumption is the intrinsic importance of life. And we all recognize that, even if we can't or have difficulty pinpointing or defining what the good, the beautiful, or the true is. But we can all give examples, and that's an example of lying to a Nazi that's trying to, you know, find the Jew, for example. So
Trying to murder someone.
yeah, yeah. I mean, they're trying to play this mere, and I always put this in quotes, this mere reason game, and taking it out of its proper context of lived life. So they're trying to play this, this language Wittgensteinian game rather than looking at it through the lens of the overall picture, as you said, and that's what I refer to as common sense.
Yeah, and I think building from that is the idea that right now some people are leaving Christianity because they feel that they think they're taking. The interesting thing is it's a contradiction because they think that they're taking the moral high ground by leaving Christianity because they think that certain things that Christians believe or that are in our Bible, they don't adhere to, they don't want to believe, they don't want to follow that. And so they think they're taking the moral high ground. But the question is, now the contradiction is, why are you claiming moral high ground? Why do you value morals if we're mere blobs and we have
Yeah,
no purpose, no meaning? Just
yeah,
like Richard Dawkins says, we're just walking
yeah.
around DNA, dancing to our
Hmm.
own rhythms.
Yeah. He says, this universe is what we would expect, a pitiless, I forgot how he says it, but and I would say I agree. If materialism is true, there is no meaning to anything or in any particular thing. But, Richard, Mr. Doc, you do not live according to that philosophy. You borrow, as Francis Schaeffer says, you borrow from the second story, from um, a theistic mindset. You borrow objective moral values and you smuggle them in to your philosophy. It seems to me that atheists like Richard Dawkins then they can be characterized as the great smugglers or the great moral thieves, or well, I don't know how you would. I mean, Richard Dawkins depicts Christians in so many ways, so many adjectives. I think it's fair to say that Richard Dawkins isn't living according to his own philosophy. And by the way, by writing a book, Mr. Dawkins, you, you believe it has purpose. Uh, you, the even attempt to write a book shows that you are incorporating the logos. You're trying to communicate intelligible words and sentences to a public, and you're not just saying that your book is meaningless. I think what Richard Dawkins is. I think his philosophy is just a jumble of contradictions and so forth. And that's when I think a life lived without God. You have to have this transcendent vantage point from which to have any meaning whatsoever. So a person who says that, well, I don't believe in God, but I have subjective meaning, is simply wrong, because for him to have any subjective meaning presupposes some objective standard or anchor point from which to derive his own personal subjective meaning from.
Yeah. No, I think the very fact that humans are constantly searching for a deeper meaning and a higher purpose, I think the search itself is evidence that there's a provider of that.
Yeah.
So,
Now, I wanted your opinion on something. I tweeted that I sometimes I just tweet stuff. I tweeted that I've been thinking about this long and hard, and I'm not sure if there's any atheists around. I think all atheists are really closet theists or something like that. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's consistent with Romans 1:20. But here's how you have to kind of expand on that. I think everyone is born in I've looked at these studies that have talked about we're all born with this desire to seek what do they call that? Patterns. Like we're pattern seeking people, and we're also sort of hardwired to believe in God. And the studies have shown that with little kids, you're just hardwired to believe. And so to get away from that, and Romans 1:20 makes this pretty clear, some people they actively suppress that knowledge, and then God gives them over to a reprobate mind. That's what it says in Romans 1:20. And so the challenge with that kind of thing for the atheist is they're now when they're in this mindset where God lets them not believe and lets them go off and live their lives as they desire. Oops. Someone's at our door. So, can you hear the dog?
Yeah, I definitely could. Do you need to go check it or?
No, I've got people down there, so they can get it. But yeah, no. So I think that they right now thinking that they're very honestly believing that there is no God. In some cases, they believe that because they originally suppressed that knowledge and pushed it away.
I want to, and I completely. It just seems so plausible to me that when you look at something, you're going to posit an explanation for something. So when you look at the stars above, this is Immanuel Kant speaking. If you look at the stars above or the conscience within, you're going to postulate God. He said you couldn't do that because there's a divide between the noumenal and the phenomenal. But he says you could on practical grounds. For the moral part. But it seems that you will always need, it's natural to postulate an explanation or a sufficient explanation for any state of affairs. So I think natural theology, these arguments for God, I think many of them are successful. Yeah, and I believe that aligns perfectly with Romans. I just think it's so commonsensical that a person can, just convince themselves beyond all common sense that, that God does not exist. It seems to me that if you're going to look at the contingent universe, and the design in the universe and objective moral values and history, that there have been some miracles, especially the resurrection of Jesus, you're going to postulate a sufficient explanation that will explain all that data. So it just seems to me that a person who says that such an explanation cannot be given or must be given naturalistically simply doesn't want to deal with the specific evidence and tries to convince themselves that, that God doesn't exist. But I want to move on. In culture, when we proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ and try to do it in an articulate way, and when people call you names in, like on the media or in everyday life at your work or wherever, I'm using examples, what should be the Christian response? Should we continue to be bold and continue to preach the gospel without embarrassment? And can you elaborate on that, SJ?
Yeah, I actually think it's almost embarrassing the way that some Christians are tucking their tails between their, and just walking away and ignoring a lot of the stuff. Because look at around the world here in the West, it's very easy for us to be Christians. We don't have to worry about persecution here in the United States for the most part. I mean, there's some people who are like the Mandalorian woman getting kicked out of the movie because she tweeted out something that somebody else said perfectly the same exact thing a couple of years ago. But anyway, let me not get down that path. But it's embarrassing because in the West, we have it so easy and we're able to worship freely. And in other parts of the world, people are actively being persecuted, jailed, imprisoned, stoned, beheaded. I mean, it's still going on around here. And so, and those people in these places like Pakistan and India and all throughout the Middle East, well,
Mhm.
those people are extremely brave. And look at us, just in some cases,
Yeah.
people are just a bunch of pansies as far
Yeah.
as, I mean, yes, go out and preach. Yes, be bold. Yes, don't worry about the consequences. And so,
Yeah.
and but don't do it in a way like, be wise as a snake but innocent as doves, Jesus said. Don't do it in a way where you're preaching to somebody who's not listening. They don't want to hear what you're going to say. I found that you don't want to go preaching to people if they're just going to, like, that's casting pearls at pigs or whatever.
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah.
want that. But you do want, if that honest person comes up to you, or that sincere person comes up, as 1 Peter 3:15, and honestly says, what is the reason for the hope you have? Now it's time. Okay, now I'm the teacher. I can share why I believe what I believe, because this person truly wants to hear. And so God will work
Yeah.
through people, works through all of us. And so we never know. Like you said, I don't believe in chance encounters either. I believe that God has orchestrated a lot of the encounters that we have.
Mhm. Yeah, and I also believe that preaching the gospel, standing up for Christianity should motivate a person to help others. I think they go hand in hand. So the reason why we should help people is because there's intrinsic goodness to mankind, and that points to God. So the ultimate motivating factor to help people and to change a person's heart is to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ. So I think that's a good reason not to be embarrassed. You know, Paul says we preach Christ crucified. It's foolish to some, a stumbling block to the Jews, foolishness to the Greeks. Or maybe I have it the wrong way, but yeah, I think we should continue to be bold and look at the Christians, like you said, in Pakistan and India, and so many other places. Man, that they do put us to shame. Um, so they put me to shame, and
Me
I
too.
think,
So, I mean, look at the early disciples too.
yeah, absolutely. It just wants to motivate me to help others, but to we shouldn't just give stuff. We should also, as the example is, teach people how to help themselves. I think we should do both at the same time. And I think those hinge on why it's important, why a person has intrinsic human dignity and value and purpose. And all those point to God. So you can't really give an answer or a great motivation for helping others if you don't give an ontology. And the ontology is that God exists and paid the ultimate price for us. And because of that, we should not be embarrassed, but we should preach so as to help others in so many ways, not just their salvation, but also their financial, and I'm not preaching a prosperity gospel, but wisdom, and helping others. So I think there's a lot on the line for us to decide or not to decide to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ, but be bold in what we do it when we do it, even to a secular culture. I think we've been an hour, close to an hour, so I think that's pretty much time's up. I know you have stuff to do, and this has been great. But do you have any closing words for this, SJ?
Yeah, I think this has been a very interesting conversation, because we've circled all around all kinds of different
Yeah.
issues. We've talked about prophecies, we've talked about the disciples a little bit. We mentioned modern times and cultures and things like that. And I think people just need to remember that Christ is for you. He loves all. For God so loved the world
Mhm.
that he gave his only one and only son. So whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. That's so important for people to realize, that no matter their situation, the people around them, maybe they've encountered some Christian, prigs, some jerks. Maybe they've encountered they're doing something maybe in their lives that they know that God wouldn't appreciate. Maybe they just don't want to go to church. Maybe they feel they like Josh. I think, and I don't think he's here anymore, but I think he is one person. He said he truly did not want to leave the faith, and so for whatever reason he left the faith. It doesn't mean he can't come back to the faith. It's Christ is there. He's ready. He's with open arms. He worked in the pits and not the pedestals, and he loves you.
Yeah.
He loves everyone. And so very important for people to know, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
And just because, an atheist or an agnostic, just because you think you've left the faith, and maybe you have, God has not left you. God is still there. And I think we need to remember that. Thank you so much, SJ. I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you all for listening. And we hope you have a great day, and God bless you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
You. God bless.
So my computer was